each justice of the peace is given a certain district within Cochise County, and each Superior Court has all of Cochise County be sharing. So the 6 Superior Court judges share all the cases for all of the county, but the Justice Court cases, the ones that deal with misdemeanors, traffic, probably the one most people have the most contact with in business with the government, they are dedicated to certain districts, and the judge here now in Sierra Vista is Judge Kenny Kerfman, and he's considered to be the judge for JP5, that's what we call it in our slang, Justice of the Peace Division 5. So I am Superior Court. It's 6 divisions, as I said, and we do all of Cochise County, and we're called the Court of General Jurisdiction. And what that means is most cases that arise, to include criminal felonies, civil cases, divorces, family law, they all originate the jurisdiction of the Superior Court where we are. And the way it works is we do all of Cochise County, but we divide up the type of law we do. So right now, the presiding judge in Cochise County is Judge Dickerson, who used to be at one point, you probably recognize his name, he used to be the Justice of the Peace here in Division 5. And he was appointed by the governor when Judge Elledge stepped down midterm, and he was appointed in, and then he got reelected, and he is now our presiding judge. Division 5, the office that I took, was previously occupied by Judge Conlog, another name you might recognize, because Judge Conlog was there for over 20 years before stepping down.
He was a Kiwanis.
Oh, was he? Good guy. I've known him and his family for many, many years. In fact, interesting trivia, when I was in high school, I assisted Judge Conlog, he was just Attorney Conlog at that time, and a sister with their father who had got early onset Alzheimer's. And I helped them take care of their dad, and it was a really good experience for me. I really appreciate them for giving me that experience. And so I go way back. Conlogs, they're really great people. But Judge Conlog was done. He decided to step down. That opened up that office, and that's what I ran. That's what I'm doing now. So the presiding judge gets to assign tasks to all the other judges, and there's different types of law. And I don't know when the last time any of you, or if you've ever gone into a law library and you walked in, and it's basically a giant building, especially at the university campuses. You walk into the U of A library or the Arizona State Library, they're enormous. They're probably as large or larger than our public library here at Sierra Vista, and they're just dedicated to law. So sometimes people get this misconception that if you're a lawyer, you know the law in general, when it's not necessarily that way. It's like the doctor, if you have a problem with your foot, there's a foot doctor, right? If you have a problem with your back, there's probably a back doctor. There's people that specialize in different areas. Well, the law is the same way. And most area, if you know an attorney, they probably specialize in 1 or 2 things. You can't really go beyond that. You become a master in your little area. So Judge Dickerson gets to tell us, and assign us tasks. Judge Bannon and Judge Kelleher are both here in Sierra Vista. They're divisions 2 and 6. Judge Kelleher does dependencies, which is when there's problems with parents and they're severing children's rights, then Judge Kelleher handles most of those. Judge Bannon does most of the juvenile, it's called delinquencies. So she presides over cases involving crimes that involve people under 18. Judge Dickerson focuses mostly on criminal law, almost exclusively, but he also does some of the mental health work, and what else does he do? Mainly criminal law, mental health. We have what's called an early resolution court, so he presides over that. And Judge Cardinal also does criminal law, but me and Judge Cardinal kind of have a similar type of caseload at this point. We kind of get divided up. We do family law, criminal law, and civil law. Kind of a third of each. And who did I leave out? Oh, Judge Thorne, who's also one of the newer judges. And I'll tell you a story about him in a minute. He's a friend of mine. But he was assigned the probate, and he does what are called Title IV enforcement of child support cases, in addition to doing civil law and family law too. So that's kind of how it's all divided up amongst all 6 of us. I'm the new guy, so of course they give me the weekend calls on the holidays, and I get 2 days a week called the duty judge. That means there has to at all times be at least one Superior Court judge available to handle emergencies. So we got 5 days in the week, and 2 of those are mine. And we also have weekend call because the juvenile rules require that there's always someone on call in case a juvenile is picked up and detained. So this last weekend I was on call, and we had a 10 o'clock hearing over in Sierra Vista. A juvenile got picked up on a warrant, and we had to address that issue. So I don't know if you're aware, but we are on call. You know, probably every 5th or 6th weekend, I've got a call weekend. We divide that up evenly. So that's kind of how our tasks are divided up. Judge Thorne, who I've known for a long time, he used to be a defense attorney here in town. I was talking to him about being a new judge, and first of all, he was telling me, he said, Jason, you don't get any training for this. He said, I went in, got sworn in, and then I went on the docket like in the afternoon. He said, I didn't, and he's a criminal attorney, right? They put him on the probate docket that afternoon. He walked in, you know, and I'm kind of getting back to what I was talking about with the law library and the law books. If you've ever seen the ARS, Arizona Revised Statutes, they fill up a shelf like this. Criminal law is one book about this big, right? You pull out that book, and that's the book the criminal lawyers deal with on a day in, day out basis. So here's this new area of law, you got no real training, you just walk right into court, and he said, I just had to figure it out, you just have to wing it, you know, and then eventually you become trained and you learn, but that's kind of like the experience of a new judge. I think I was a little luckier than him, because Judge Dickerson also came in at a time where he felt a little bit unguided, and now he's the presiding judge, so he made sure that when I came in, and I'm the first new guy since he's been the presiding judge, so he kind of took me under his wing and basically told me what he did and gave me some guidance. And the vice presiding judge, I'm not sure if I'm calling that title right, is Judge Cardinal, who is also a new judge. So she had a similar experience of Judge Thorne. She felt a little lost. So I had probably more guidance than any of the other judges coming in because they all had that experience recently. So when I came in, they did give me a lot of help, and I really felt, you know, lucky to have that guidance coming in. When I was in private practice, I was doing mostly prosecution, but I also did some criminal defense. So like Judge Thorne, my background was criminal law. Although I did have a private practice for several years, and I did do some civil, but very limited, you know. So and you learn these things in law school, but that was a long time ago, right? So you kind of have these vague memories of certain principles and concepts. It takes a while. It's kind of like sharpening an old rusty knife. Eventually, it gets sharp in time. So that's how I felt, you know, being the new guy coming in, and I really enjoyed, you know, the chance to get to know everybody and see how the system works. And I think that our system works really, really well. I've always thought that, even as a prosecutor. You know, people, I would sometimes be surprised at the outcome of some of my cases, but then after my personal feelings dissipate in time, and in hindsight, when I look back, it's amazing to me how often I feel that's exactly the way it should have worked out. You know, it's hard to see it when you're in it. You know, sometimes when I was in trial, you know, I would win or lose. You know, and it surprised me because I was expecting, you know, different things to happen along the way. But what's amazed me about our system of justice, all the flaws that it has, it tends to work most of the time. You know, even though you can't really see it right then when it's happening, and you feel like, gosh, this is not just. But then you look back after 6 months, after your personal feelings kind of dissipate, and you realize, wow, now that I can look back and see how everything worked, this is exactly how it's supposed to work. It's better for all of us. So I really have a deep respect for our system, especially our criminal justice system. And I've seen it work, and I know it works. And it works because the people that are involved have, most of the time, have the right idea and the right motivations, and they're coming from the right place, and they're good people trying to do their best. Even though we're human, we fall short sometimes, most of the time we get it right. And so it's a real privilege to see that in action from the bench. One of my experiences I didn't know what I was going to be assigned to. When I was in private practice, I did not like doing family law because it seemed so depressing to me. But it's the area on the bench that I like most. So it kind of caught me by surprise. I was not expecting that, but I really enjoy, sitting down with people and trying to help them work out their issues. I feel like I can make a difference there where I never felt that way before. And I don't remember who told me this, but they said when you work in criminal law, you see bad people at their best. When you work in family law, you see good people at their worst. And it's just interesting seeing the dynamics and the kinds of troubles people are going through. And this position kind of gives you a chance, to assist people and help them work out what's wrong, whether it be a criminal issue where someone made a mistake and they need to face their consequence, or a family law issue where two people just don't get along anymore. They have got kids and they're trying to figure out what to do next, and they can't figure it out themselves. Government is only there to do the things that we can't do ourselves. So I try to make that clear as I can to people in family law. I say, look, you don't know me, I don't know you. All I know is what you've told me today, and what you've sent me in writing, and I'm going to be making decisions that involve you and your children from now into the future. If you two can sit down as two adults and work it out, you know your children much better than I do. It would be best if that were to happen. But if you can't do that, then I'm in a position, been put in a position where I get to do that for you. So, and sometimes I have to do that, and it's not always easy. I will get back to how I ended up in New Hampshire, just because I did promise I would go over that. I never had any, well, there's an old saying that says, life happens when you're busy making plans. Well, I was making plans when I went to New Hampshire, and I went to a school called Franklin Pierce, which at the time was highly ranked in the area of what's called intellectual property law. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it's patents, trademarks, and a particular area that I was inclined to go in was called intellectual asset management. And that's what they did. They were like it's called a boutique school. So they just did one little thing. And of course, that school had existed for many years, and intellectual property law wasn't a big deal for the rest of the world. No one really cared about it. But at the time I was there, it was starting to get big. And that was the time when the internet was picking up, and there was a lot of technology. And basically, that technology sector was trying so hard to just hire anybody to fill some of those slots that tons of money started pouring into intellectual property. And that little school, Franklin Pierce, could no longer compete with George Washington University, Berkeley, the big money schools of the world. So eventually they had to make the choice, and they merged with the University of New Hampshire because they couldn't afford to compete in that business anymore. Back when no one cared about it, they were top dog. But back when George Washington and all the other schools started pouring lots of money into it, stealing all their professors, outpaying them, things like that, they couldn't compete anymore. They had to merge with the school. So that's how I ended up at the University of New Hampshire. How I ended up not going that direction is another story altogether. I had an externship in Wisconsin with a big firm there for intellectual asset management. Now, for those of you that don't know what that is, it was kind of a new field at the time. There weren't a lot of even classes taught on that subject, but it was an area where you were set to find value and measure value of intangible assets. So companies were starting to understand at that time that some of our biggest assets are contained in the knowledge that the people in our business have. So how do you value that? When you get to Microsoft and you're trying to put a value on it of $200 billion or whatever it was at the time, it was a lot less than that. But how do you value those intellectual, intangible assets? So it was a whole field that was kind of rising in that area, and my externship fell through at the last minute, 2 weeks before I was going to move. And of course, Lita and I were in New Hampshire. Lita had already moved back to Arizona in wait, basically, to see what was going to happen next. And my externship fell through. So I had 2 weeks to set up a new externship, because it was my last semester of law school, and the last semester is an externship. You go in and you get real world experience. And I was going to do my externship with this firm. So I had 2 weeks to figure it out. Usually these are things you plan for like a year. You're in communication with people, you set it up, and you I mean, it's not an easy thing to set up. But I got lucky, I suppose, and I happened to know somebody who had a contact in the Arizona Corporation Commission, and I was able at the last minute to set something up to go into the Arizona Corporation Commission in the Securities Division and do my externship there. So, I mean, all of a sudden I had a new plan, and that's where I went. So I ended up back in Arizona, and then once I was back in Arizona, and it was time to get a real job, all the people I knew were in the criminal law area. Because before I went to law school, I worked at the Cochise County Attorney's Office. And I worked under Alan Pauley. I don't know how many of you remember him. He was our Cochise County attorney for many, many years. Actually, he died in office. Good guy. Actually, I learned a lot from him. I'm really thankful I got to know him and got to work under him. And so all my professional contacts were in the criminal setting in the Cochise County Attorney's Office. So when I went and finally applied to get a job, I got it right away, right in. I already knew everybody, they knew me. It was just kind of an easy thing to glide into. And then it never changed, I never went back. I never, that idea of kind of winding my way back into intellectual asset management just never materialized. And now I'm back home. Now everyone I know is an arm's length away. And it just, when we had kids, and our parents were near our children. So at that point, we just kind of got tied back.
Good for you.
So that's my story. And if you have any questions about the courts or me or anything, I'd be happy to answer them. I appreciate giving me the chance to talk to you and kind of share the story of the courts and answer any questions about the courts that you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How many cases, what percentage actually go to trial? Because I'm thinking that not as...
Criminal cases?
Yeah,
Very, very few.
that's what I thought. So what do you, it's all in mediation or they just take a plea?
Well, a variety of things can happen along the way, but I would have to say, if I gave it a percentage, I mean, maybe 3% actually end up going to trial. And it was an interesting thing for the courts to go through COVID in trials.
Yeah.
Cochise County is one of the only courts in Arizona that actually conducted trials during COVID.
Wow.
Wore the face masks.
Yep.
They brought in the jury in like segments to go through and select the jury. It was a really interesting process, but they figured it out and they did it. And another, notch in the belt with Cochise County, we figured it out. We aren't going to let things get in our way. We get things done. COVID's not going to stop justice, and we did it. So we kind of set, I think, a good example for the rest of the state on how you can go about pushing through and doing trials, even when you're faced with things like COVID. And the leadership in the courts and people, I think they do a great job, getting us through that.
I have a specific question. If a child is 16 and they are a constant runaway, they get picked up and brought back home, and then they, as soon as they can, they're out again. What happens to the parents if, they're trying, but, legally, what happens
Well,
to the parents?
legally, the law is always kind of geared towards reacquainting and keeping children with their family. So that's kind of like the default position. But for example, that's actually the case that I was called in for this last weekend, a similar case where this was a runaway and she just wouldn't stay home. And grandma was the one actually in charge. So I don't know the mom's story because I was only there to handle the warrant, right? But the story was that she had run away and grandma couldn't, I guess, enforce the rules to a point where she could keep her there, and this child was of an age where, once someone gets to be 16 or 17, and can grandma really force them to stay in the house, or if they sneak out at night, what can you do? So the decision, the state in that situation, it's called removal from the home, and they keep them in custody until they can figure out what to do. So, and they offer, one of the things that happens to the system, the juvenile system is actually pretty good. I think maybe better funded for these sorts of things because we're looser with our tax dollars when it comes to helping children. But there are a lot of services that the state offers parents and grandparents and their children to try to fix these situations. It doesn't always work, of course, but the law requires that in order to remove a child from the parent, there has to be a lot of different things at play, primarily the safety and well-being of the child.
One more thing.
Yes?
We read in the paper quite often about the shortage of everything in the court system. How's that affecting you?
Well, we don't have enough attorneys down here, as you've read, and there are lots of potential reasons, but I'm a homegrown person, so I have a lot of people in Cochise County that are close to me, my friends and my family. I have a lot of reasons for being here, but there aren't a lot of homegrown professionals, not just attorneys, but doctors, accountants. You know, because you can make a lot more money going somewhere else. So it's hard to convince people, you know, to come down to these rural areas. And what ends up happening, and this is not just professional like lawyers and doctors, but law enforcement as well.
Yep.
They come down, you know, to SVPD, they get trained, they get 3 years of experience, and then they go to Phoenix where they immediately get a 20% pay bump. And then they're near their family and they're making more money, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, we're having a hard time attracting professionals to Cochise County, and then you have situations where one of the biggest civil practices in Cochise County was Judge Cardinals. So she got elected judge, closed her practice down, now she's a judge, and now she's left a hole, you know, in terms of the private practice community. We lost someone for other reasons. Mr. Bays, not that long ago, he had some troubles, and he closed his practice down. It turns out his practice was one of the biggest family law practices in Cochise County, so now you've got that hole, and there's just a lot of these holes that have been made that have not been filled. Judge Thorne was a defense attorney, big practitioner, he had a big practice, he got elected judge. There's another hole.
Judge
You know, so
Thompson.
as we climb, you know, as the people who have been here for a while climb the ladder and move to different positions, we leave gaps behind. Cochise County Attorney's Office is having trouble attracting people. The defender's offices, you know, we have budgets in Cochise County that are not so big in comparison to Maricopa County, Union County. You know, so they've done a good job bringing those wages up, but Cochise County is very conservative, we're very budget conscious, and we're very resistant to raising the wage and taxing higher to get it, and as a result, we're not attracting some professionals down here. You know, it is encouraging though, there are some people that are coming up that are homegrown, that probably once they're certified to practice law will stay. There's one in particular that's at the county attorney's office now that's doing an internship with them in law school. So there's one. There's a few out there that are coming. But ultimately, it's not just law, it's all the professions in Cochise County. We just don't pay people as much here as they do in other places.
In terms of family law and problems with young teenagers who steered to the left or whatever, do you work with people like Mary's Mission, our guest speaker from the last meeting, where we have troubled kids that we're trying to save?
The courts, I haven't had much contact with other community services from my position. I had a lot more contact as an attorney. So I think, for example, as a judge, I'm more of a position to approve what's been worked out by the attorneys than coordinate. So I'll look at what the attorneys present, and I'll approve what they've presented or decline what they've presented. But it's the attorneys, I think, that are out there, you know, on the streets, meeting people, trying to set stuff up, getting their clients into services that would justify maybe a reduced sentence, that sort of thing. So I think the attorneys, as an attorney, I had a lot of contact with mental health services. I coordinated the diversion program in Cochise County for several years. And so it kind of puts you in touch with all these different groups. But as a judge, I don't think I've had any contact yet with any of these agencies. Doesn't mean that I won't. I haven't figured out, you know, what. There hasn't been any need because it's not my role.
There's been a massive amount of money from the federal government out due to COVID. Has any of that come down through your channels?
Money. When you say down through my channels, how are you receiving the money that get to the criminal justice system?
I don't know.
Like,
But there's been huge amounts of money from
Right.
COVID thrown out for everything.
yeah.
And is any of that money getting into the justice system at our level?
Well, one of the issues that that has come up for me is that the stimulus money, of course, when you have a family and you get divorced and they're paying you per kid, you know, stimulus, both parents want that money, right? Or the stimulus checks goes to one after the divorce, they have all the money, they spend it. So it has been an issue in terms of everyone wants that stimulus money, but that's how I see it. You know, I don't really see how it has benefited people directly, where because of that stimulus they were able to feed their children that week or do something important. I only see it as one party wants the money that the other party got, or at least they want their share, so we figure out how to make it fair. So, but I don't know how they're using it, you know, and I don't know if it's used for good or bad. I don't know that. I just know that people want it. I help them figure out what's fair and try to get it distributed fairly.
Well, thank you very much.